Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love. Welcome to the Travelers Podcast. I'm Brother Ali. If you listen to this podcast a lot, you're going to hear that this is a special episode. Now, I say that almost every episode, but you'll hear why this one is. If you're new to this, maybe you found this because you're looking to travel to Istanbul, you're certainly welcome here. We're very, very grateful that you're here. As a brief introduction, my name is Brother Ali. I converted to Islam 30 years ago. I found Islam through hip-hop music and culture, and I became an imam in the community that I was in Minneapolis. I was also a community organizer and activist, but people know me mostly because of the fact that for the past 25 years, I have been making and performing hip-hop music professionally. For the last 4 years, my family and I have been living in Istanbul. I'm making this episode because there are a lot of people that want to visit Istanbul. This is my advice, my ultimate guide for visiting Istanbul, specifically as a Western traveler who's coming here to have a spiritual experience, who's coming here for historical, cultural, spiritual reasons. I'm going to share with you some advice that I think is really helpful about logistical things like where to pack and where to stay and where not to stay. I'm going to give you a very specific entire day, places that I would go, places that I would eat, places that I would visit in this particular order. So there's going to be a lot of practical and logistical advice, but I'm also going to talk about intention and about manners and culture. And please, please, please don't skip that part. This podcast is sponsored by a really incredible group of people called Zakat Foundation. Z-A-K-A-T is the pillar of Islam that deals with charity and giving back. It's the universal concept that if we find ourselves having enough to live, that we ought to share with the people who do not have enough to live right now. Zakat Foundation does a really amazing work all over the world. It's a Muslim-led organization, but they don't only help Muslims and they don't use the work to proselytize. So go to Zakat US on social media. You can follow everything that they do. You can also go to their website at zakat.org. Find something that you like and just put something on it. $5 gets a hot meal to a person who needs it. $50 a month supports an orphan. And for that particular orphan support program, 100% of your money goes directly to the orphans and their families and the people that are helping them. Zakat Foundation works with the people on the ground. They had success getting meals into the people of Gaza. They helped people during the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. They help to feed the people of Ukraine. It's a small group of people that do a lot of incredible work. So we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. Go hit the link, check them out, put something on something that makes sense to you. Okay, so you want to visit Istanbul, and the first thing to know is to pronounce the name of the city the right way. A lot of people come here and they say Istanbul. It's Istanbul. It sounds simple, but a lot of people that come here tell their friends, like, I'm going to Istanbul. I lived in Minneapolis, and a lot of people don't know the difference between Minneapolis and Indianapolis, so they just say Minneapolis. And whenever somebody would come and get on stage and be like, what's up, Minneapolis? I had a desire to throw them off the stage. Matter of fact, one time I met with a really revered teacher of Islam, as somebody that I really love to death, and I was asking very humbly and genuinely, can you please visit us in Minneapolis? And he said, yes, Minneapolis. And I said, Sheikh, Minneapolis. It's a really important thing if you're going to go to a place. It's not that difficult, but the word is Istanbul, and you can say it. So let's start with that. Istanbul is a city that, as you know, was named Constantinople for a long time. It's important to Muslims because it was mentioned directly by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There were several places that he mentioned by name and he blessed them, but when he talked about what they called at that time Constantinia or Constantinople, he said this would be a place that would become a land of Islam, and that the leader of the army that opened it would be blessed, and also that army would be blessed. And so not long after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the person who had hosted the Prophet when he left Mecca and went to Medina was a man by the name of Abu Ayyub. And that group of people that welcomed them in Medina became known as the Ansar. So his name is Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, May Allah be well pleased with him. In Istanbul, he's called Ayub Sultan. This man's story is incredibly beautiful because when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to Medina, everybody wanted to host him. And so he had the very wise idea to get off of his camel and to let the camel walk the streets of Medina. And he said, wherever the camel sits down, that's the home that I'll stay in. And so the camel, whose name was Qaswa, sat down at the home of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. And it's also said that Abu Ayyub was actually a distant relative of the Prophet Muhammad. So what's beautiful is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, for several months lived in the home of this man, Abu Ayyub, and he hosted him. Abu Ayyub cooked for him and cleaned after him. It was a 2-level house, and they said that when the Prophet Muhammad first moved in, Abu Ayyub didn't feel comfortable making the Prophet Muhammad go up and down stairs. He said, you're going to be receiving guests, you're going to be very busy, so me and my wife will stay upstairs and you stay downstairs. But because of the deep love and admiration and respect they had for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Abu Ayyub and his wife didn't want to stand on the floor above where the Prophet might be, for fear that their foot would be over his head, just out of that symbolic love and honor and respect for the person that they firmly believed to be the messenger of God. So they spent the entire time like scaling the walls, walking the perimeter of the place and sleeping like that. And one day they accidentally spilled some water, and they were so worried that the water would leak through the roof to the bottom floor and spill on the Prophet that they stayed up all night just soaking up every little drop of water that they could see. And it came to the Prophet's attention that they weren't resting and that they weren't enjoying being in their home. And so the decision was made for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to move upstairs and Abu Ayyub and his wife to move downstairs. And they hosted him. They were very, very close with him. And it's also said that directly next door to the home of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari was a vacant lot. He actually donated that vacant lot to be the beginning place where they built the mosque of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, what we now call Masjid Nabawi, in Medina, the second holiest place in Islam. Part of that land was actually given as a charity and a donation by Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. So this is an incredible human being. And he heard with his own ears the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, say that Constantinople would one day be a land of Islam. So the Prophet Muhammad mentioned China, for example. He said the Chinese are people of deep wisdom and knowledge is the lost possession of the believer. So seek it wherever you find it, even if you have to go as far as China. And so after the departure of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, people from his household and others went to China. And so there's a Chinese Muslim community that's been there from the beginning of Islam. But Abu Ayyub was already an elder man by this point. They say that he was either in his 70s or in his 80s. But he demanded to go on the military campaign to go to Constantinople to fulfill the prophetic statement of the Prophet Muhammad. And so he went on this mission. They were not successful in that particular mission, and he died during that time. He noticed that death was coming, and he said, I want to be buried inside of the city of Constantinople. Constantinople didn't become open to the Muslims for several hundred years, but it was always known by both the Muslims and the Christians that the body of this saintly companion of the Prophet Muhammad was buried there. And so people would go and visit it. They actually tried to obscure where the resting place was. But then when Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih led the group that opened up the city of Constantinople for Islam, they actually located where the resting place was. And so now that's considered to be one of, if not the most spiritual places in Istanbul. And the understanding was that Christians and Jews and Muslims from all over the world could come here, I'm recording in Istanbul, could come here and practice their religion here and be safe here and be whole here. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that the Muslims are really proud of is that when the leaders of Spain were forcing Muslims and Jews to convert to Christianity, they were calling them Morenos and Moriscos, and they actually expelled the Jewish community from Spain, which had formerly been a land of Islam where Jews were protected and were thriving. The leader of the Ottoman Caliphate at that time was a man named Sultan Bayazid II. This is somebody that Muslims revere and regard really highly. His mosque is one of the mosques that you can go and visit in Istanbul. Bayazid II wrote a letter to the head of Spain. And he said, you've impoverished yourself and you've enriched us. And he wrote laws saying that when the Jewish people come, they have to be protected. They have to be integrated into society. You have to buy from them and sell from them. You have to rent them property. You have to hire them. You have to do business with them because of the fact that their religion is protected under the laws of Islam. So this has always been a place that brought together these different worlds. And most of the city of Istanbul is actually on the European continent, but you'll see this beautiful strait of water called the Bosphorus. I live near the Bosphorus. I look at it every day, and my heart is so in love with the Bosphorus. It doesn't look the same 2 days in a row. From 5 a.m. until 7 a.m., you'll see that the Bosphorus looks entirely different. When I travel to go and do shows and I'm away from Istanbul, like I wake up in the morning sad that I'm not seeing what the Bosphorus looks like today. So on one side of the Bosphorus is the European continent, and on the other side is the Asian side of Istanbul, and it's the Asian continent. It literally is the edge of Asia. And so this city is half secular, half religious, half European, half Asian. Some people consider it to be Middle Eastern, but it's always been an extremely important place. And to this day, it's the most visited city in the entire world because of the fact that it sits at the precipice of these different societies and civilizations and parts of the world. It's one of the most dynamic places that you could ever visit. So the first thing we have to think about whenever we embark on anything, especially as spiritual people, is what is my intention? It's important to know, is my intention to go on vacation? Or is it my intention to go on a spiritual quest and journey that will allow me to grow, take steps along the spiritual path? Or am I just going to get away from it all? Because honestly, you can do both of those things in Turkey, and it makes a big difference because there's a very, very different social agreement happening. If you want to go on vacation, you want to be pampered, you want things to be easy, you want the comforts and luxuries that you can afford. That is a very different trip. And you can go to a resort, and they have halal resorts here where, you know, people are dressed modestly at the beaches and there's no alcohol and everything is halal and you can be there with your family. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a getaway and having some quality time with family. But that is very different from coming to a place like Istanbul, a country like Turkey with all of its history and with all of the stuff that it's facing right now, and expecting for our Western needs to be met, for things to go according to the way that we think they're supposed to go. Visiting a society in a country like Turkey, like Istanbul, is an opportunity to step outside of what we're used to. The growth happens because our expectations and our routines get disrupted. So we learn something about ourselves. We learn, how does my ego respond if I order a room with air conditioning and the air conditioning ain't about nothing? It's not cooling my room down, which is something that could really happen. I paid extra for a non-smoking room, and it smells like somebody is smoking in here right now, which can very well happen. If I order a taxi or if I order a specific thing at a restaurant and it doesn't come in the time that I think it should come, in the condition that I think it should come, with the presentation, with the manners that I expect it to be, what am I going to do when my nefs doesn't get what it wants, when my ego doesn't get what it wants? In the 4 years since my family has been here, I realize, especially when I go back to visit America or when Americans come to visit here, that what makes this place so special is not only its aesthetic beauty, the incredible architecture and the landscape and the weather and the Bosphorus and the seagulls and the cats and the music and the tulips and the food and the smells and the sounds and all of that. All of that stuff is incredible. But also, the people here have a wellness and a wholeness to their character, their sense of humanity, their sense of virtue. They have a missing piece of the puzzle that we don't have. There's a certain humanity that's still alive here. And I see it also, you know, it looks and feels a little different, but I see it when I go to places like West Africa that have a certain type of protection around their culture. There's a certain type of innocence. There's a certain type of goodness. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have not signed on to all of the commercial expectations of Western life. So when I lived in America, I expected that if I had the money, I could get any fruit that I could imagine, and it would be completely ripe, and it would arrive at my doorstep in a matter of hours or even a matter of minutes. What I realized from being outside of America is that a lot of really unnatural things have to happen in order for that to be the case. It means there's a lot of things that have happened socially, environmentally, commercially. An entire society of people had to sign on to this idea that it's okay to put everybody through this unnatural stuff in order to make sure that that level of commerce can be facilitated. And so I find that when Americans come here, we have a lot of expectations, and we don't necessarily realize how those expectations have contributed to our own mental health crises, spiritual crises, our neuroticism. I say this as an American, but we're weird. And I didn't realize how weird we were until I got away and I started to be influenced by the place that I am now. So when I go to America or when Americans come here, it's a little bit jarring. Like, just being honest. And I think it's really important that when we visit a place, and especially if we have some sort of spiritual, historical interest and aspiration, that we don't expect that place to conform to what we're used to. I'm coming here not only accepting that this is going to be outside of my norms and my expectations, but in a lot of ways I'm embracing that. All right, so I said that we're going to do some practical and logistical stuff, so let's get to it. The number one thing to know when you come to Istanbul is that this country does not speak English, and they're not impressed that you're an American or a British person or a French person. These people were the Ottoman Empire. Also, the secular people resisted being colonized by the Europeans. They're doing just fine and they know it. And honestly, that's why they've been able to preserve their culture so well. They're Turkish people that speak Turkish. They watch Turkish movies and Turkish series. They listen to Turkish music. Anything that they want and need and are interested in, they will figure out a Turkish version of it. Understand that the place you're visiting is so dope and so different from what you're used to, partially because of the fact that they maintain their language. So don't be funny with them about the fact that I make a joke that I've been living here for 4 years and they haven't learned English yet. What do I pack as a spiritual seeker coming to Istanbul from the West? Number one, I would say bring multiple credit cards, debit cards, bank cards, because what you'll find is that a lot of places take cards, but they have different credit card reading systems, and for no explicable reason, your Visa will work at some places and not in others. Your MasterCard will work in some places and not in others, and there's really no reason for it. And if you're able to exchange and get some Turkish lira when you're in whatever country you're in, that's fine. You can also get them from the ATM. There are ATMs that give you English options, and if you go to Guarantee Bank and you put in a card from an English-speaking country, it'll automatically just show up in English. So you can pull cash out of the ATMs. It's good to keep at least 1,000 lira on you. 1,000 lira is, as of the time of recording this, around $30-something. So if you keep 1,000 lira on you, you'll be able to jump in a cab, you'll be able to get a meal, you'll be able to do what you need to do. You can't make a big purchase with that, but you'll be able to do what you need to do and have some walking around money. But whatever you do, do not do the exchange places at the airport or in the Sultan Ahmed area. They're going to run your pockets and it's just not worth it. Bring several cards. One of them should be a bank card, and pull money out of the ATM when you get here. It's really important to have the right footwear, so bring comfortable shoes that slip on and off easily. If you go to these historic sites like resting places and mosques and schools and even to people's homes, you're going to be taking your shoes off and putting them on a lot. So you want to get shoes that you can get off and on really easily, whether they're slip-on shoes or sandals, even sneakers that you can slide in and out easily. Make sure that they're very comfortable. You're going to be walking on cobblestone streets. You're going to be walking up and down a bunch of hills. You're probably going to get minimum 10,000 steps in a day. So it's really important. But also, you're not going to want to bring your flyest pair of like sneakerhead kicks because your shoes are going to get beat up. So they have to be just the right balance of easy to get off and on, comfortable, and also something that you're not going to get mad if they get beat up a little bit. If you're going to wear sandals or something that you wear without socks, make sure that you always have a pair of socks with you, because there's nothing wrong with wearing open-toe shoes when you're out on the street. But when you transition into a mosque or to somebody's house, your bare feet are not going to be welcomed. So you're going to want to have some socks for men and for women to slide on when you go inside a mosque or in somebody's house. You're going to want to bring light, flowy, modest, non-form-fitting clothes. So this goes for men and for women. If you're going to go into mosques and things like that, you do not want to wear shorts. You want to wear long pants, and you want to wear long sleeves. And it's better for both men and women to wear something on your head. For women, it's a requirement when you go into the mosques and the resting places that you do have a hijab on. So even if you're a person that doesn't wear hijab all the time, you can just tie it around your neck and pull it up over your head if you don't want to wear it all the time. But it's important to do that. So you're going to want to wear clothes that really cover you and that are modest, but also are really light, especially in the summertime. Istanbul can be really hot and the sun can be really intense. Linen, breathable, things like that. It's nice to be presentable and to be modest and to be clean, but you don't need to wear anything flashy. The entire country of Turkey is really experiencing a very, very crippling and damaging financial downturn. There's a lot of inflation. So come here looking respectable, but don't stunt. This is not the time to pull out all of your Louis Vuitton and all those other stuff like that. You don't want to be walking around wearing a t-shirt that costs more than what people pay for rent. One thing to know about Islamic clothes is that Turkey is a country that has a divide between secular people and religious people. It's two differing worldviews. It's like their left and their right. It's like they're Democrat and Republican. It's not as simple as conservative and liberal, but it's important to know that there are two very differing worldviews that are sharing space, and I think they share space very, very well. So there are neighborhoods that are a little bit more conservative and religious, where there's not going to be bars. People are not going to be drinking in public. You probably won't see a drunk person. You probably won't smell alcohol. But you can do almost anything you want in Istanbul. And even in those neighborhoods, the people who want to drink, there are certain grocery stores where you can buy alcohol and they drink it at home. But they know that that's a point of contention, and so they would not drink in front of people in public in those particular areas. Likewise, people who pray and people who sing religious songs will not do that in public. There are mosques everywhere, even in some restaurants and things like that, shopping malls. There's a room where you go and pray. So Muslims in the West, we're so used to praying that sometimes we're going to throw our jacket down on the floor right in the middle of the airport, and sometimes we're going to pray in public. That's not something you would do in Istanbul because of the fact that people respect differences and they share space in ways that I think are really beautiful. Likewise, if you're going to wear religious clothes, if you're wearing religious clothes that are from a different culture, especially from Arab culture. So if you're wearing a thobe, that's going to read in a way that's a little bit offensive and intrusive on non-religious people. However, if particularly men wear Turkish cultural religious clothes. These are the pants that are very wide from the hip to the knee, so they look like hammer pants. Some of them got to up to 7 and more pleats in the pants. They're big, and then they taper a little bit at the bottom. And you're wearing the Turkish style shirt that maybe will go to the waist or a little bit past the waist, but they don't go all the way to the knee like the Pakistani and African shirts do, and they definitely don't go all the way to above the ankle. If we wear culturally religious Turkish clothes, even a person who's not religious, even a person who's secular will look at that and they will think to themselves, at least this person is honoring our shared Turkish lineage. And so it will read to them in a way that's not offensive, but it's actually respectful. So as a man, if you're going to wear outwardly religious clothes, it's best to wear stuff that's Turkish. And I'll tell you about some places that you can get those. Turkey uses European power and also those plugs with the 2 prongs. So if you don't have them already, make sure you get some of those and then check your appliances. Most cell phones in America, they have 120 volts. So most things that you plug in America, if you come to Europe and they have 240 volts, your clippers, your coffee grinder, that stuff is going to explode. Most computers and cell phones and things like that can work with just an adapter, but make sure you check your stuff and make sure you get that 2-prong European adapter. Another thing to check before you come is your cell phone provider. Make sure very specifically that it will work in Turkey. Don't just say, well, I'm going to Europe. Make sure that it works in Turkey. Double check and double check and double check. You can do things like an eSIM. And if you're not so sure, or if you get off the plane and you realize that your cell phone service isn't working like you thought it would, you can actually buy a SIM card in the airport, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Plan for it to be sunny, especially if you come here in the summer months, June through September. Even people that come from places like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, when they land in Istanbul, they're like, yo, there's something intense about the sun here. So make sure to bring sunglasses, make sure to bring sunblock. If you come in the summer months particularly, it's going to be very sunny and it's going to be very hot. Protect yourself from the sun. Don't be out here looking crazy. All right, let's talk about landing at the airport. There are several airports in the city of Istanbul. Double check and make sure which one you're flying into, both for yourself and for the people that are picking you up. If you're coming into Sabiha, make sure that your partners know that, because Istanbul is a big city. The airports are over an hour away from each other. A lot of times different airports are going to be different travel distances. If you come into IST, Istanbul Airport, which is where most of the international flights are probably going to come, plan also for an extra hour of travel once you get into the airport. The airport is pretty far outside the city. And so, you could get to where you're going in a half hour, but it's also a really big airport. So just know that when you're booking your travel plans, it might take you 20 hours to get to Istanbul Airport, but it's probably going to be another hour of walking through the airport to go through customs and immigration and to get your bag and to meet your party. And then it's probably going to be another hour after you get in your cab or meet your party or whatever to get to where you're going. If you're coming into Istanbul Airport, then as soon as you get your bag and you come out of customs, which isn't much, they don't usually search you really that much in customs. So you've got your bag, you went through immigration, you got your passport stamped, and now you're coming out into the part where people meet you. It's automatically going to guide you to go to your right. And as soon as you get to your right, you're going to see a Burger King restaurant. Now, there are Muslims in the West that only eat halal food. That's how my family was. And so that means that for a lot of us, we don't eat fast food. And I think that's a good thing. But there are people that come from the West that are really excited to have halal fast food. So there is that Burger King right there. There's also, I think there's a Popeyes inside of the airport. In Istanbul, they also have KFC and they have Domino's, and there's a few other places like that. I'm not really into that stuff, but some people really are. The reason I say this, though, is that if you're meeting somebody, whether it's a driver or your friends or whoever, or if people get separated, the best meeting place is going to be Burger King, because it's right when you walk out of customs. If for whatever reason you need Wi-Fi when you get to the airport, your Wi-Fi just didn't connect or whatever, you thought your phone service was going to work and for some reason it's not. This is one of the many things about being in Istanbul that is going to be much more complicated than it seems like it needs to be, but I'm just telling you the news of how it is. You can't just get on free Wi-Fi when you get off the plane, but there is free Wi-Fi. You just got to jump through some hoops. What you do is when you come out of customs, instead of going to the right, you're actually going to go to the left, and you'll see a kiosk that's run by Turk Telecom, where you can get free Wi-Fi. You're going to need to enter your name and your passport information, and it's going to print you out a little coupon, almost like you're waiting online at the bakery or something like that. It prints you out this little coupon with a code on it. You enter that code, and then you get a free half hour or hour of Wi-Fi that you're going to need to re-up again once that's over. I'm sorry that's the way it is, but that's just what it is. If you do want to get a SIM card that's native to Turkey, there's a lot of places to do it. You'll see Vodafone and all these different places. Turkcell is another one. But if you follow the directions to go to the kiosk where you get Wi-Fi, right to the left there, you're going to see a Turk Telecom. If you walk in there, most of the places in those stores, they have somebody that will speak a basic amount of English. You can buy a SIM card there. Make sure you keep your old SIM card, though. A lot of times they'll have some tape. You get a card with the new SIM on it. Tape your SIM card to that plastic card that they give you and keep it in your wallet. That way, when you go back, you don't lose your SIM card for your native country. If your bag gets misplaced, there's an info desk there. There's two of them. There's one for Turkish Airlines specifically. You're going to see at the Istanbul airport for everything from lost and found and everything else. Turkish Airlines is running the show, so they have their own version of everything. There's a specific entrance for them. There's a specific lost and found for them. And there's a specific information desk for if you lose your bags. But for everybody else, there's an info desk. You go there, you make your claim, you make your report. Do as much as you can before you leave the airport, because once you leave the airport, it becomes very, very difficult. If your bags do get lost, they will probably offer to deliver them to you. If you need to come back to the airport to collect your bag, go to that information desk, let them know, and they'll have somebody come out and meet you. You might end up waiting 20 minutes, but somebody will come out and meet you. Give them your passport to go collect your bag. So make sure you bring your passport if you do end up going back to the airport. And they're going to take you way to the other end of that area. So you're going to get your step steps in just walking around the airport. But they'll take you into a room with a bunch of luggage, and they probably will say, hey, go ahead and find your bag. Good luck with all of that, and definitely make sure that you pack what you will need for a day or two inside your carry-on bag. Like I mentioned, there are places to eat in the airport right when you come through security, and remember that there's going to be probably a long drive to get to your Airbnb or wherever you're staying. There's a bathroom there. There are really nice, clean bathrooms all over Istanbul. The level of cleanliness and hygiene and upkeep in most of the public bathrooms in this country is really high. All of the bathrooms, even in McDonald's or the public ones at the mosque, they all have a bidet. And I'm telling you, once you get on bidet life, you will never go back. So if you're not Muslim and you're listening to this, Muslims, every time they use the bathroom, every time we use the toilet, we have to wash that place with water, not just with paper, not just shaking it and putting it away, but to actually wash it with water. If you go to your Muslim friend's house that live in the West, you'll probably see a spray bottle, a squirt bottle, maybe even a flower pot in the bathroom just full of tap water. And you're like, what's that for? It's because we clean ourselves every time we use the bathroom, and you ought to try it. So they have a nice bathroom there for men and women. They have also family bathrooms. All of the bathrooms have complete privacy too. So if you go in a stall, the door for that stall is going to go completely from floor to ceiling. You can get in there and have privacy. It's one of the things that Muslims believe in. Even if you go to like a health club or a gym, they're going to have places where you can change your clothes. Muslims are not naked with each other in public, entirely naked. It's not like being in a locker room in America. So be respectful of that and also enjoy it. There's a really nice mosque if you want to go and pray. If you've got a layover, you're waiting for people to come, that's a very relaxing place where you can go and say your prayers, you can read, you can even take a nap inside there. Nobody bothers you as long as you're quiet and respectful. Again, if you're a lady, you're going to want to wear a hijab. If you're a man going in there, you're not going to wear shorts. Make sure to put socks on if you're not wearing socks when you go in those spaces. But those mosques are really important. There are also non-fast food options at the airport where you can get some tea, you can get a little something to eat on if you need to while you're going to your spot. A lot of people come to Turkey for medical tourism. And so when you're walking to the area to leave the airport, you're going to see that there's hospitals right there. If you need to get a checkup or something like that, you can do it right at the airport. It's really affordable. The healthcare here is incredible. Ask about the price before you do anything, especially with private places. Sometimes they're going to try to run your pockets, but ask them what it costs first and shop around if you need to. There are also pharmacies inside of the airport before you get out. And there are a lot of things that you need a prescription for in the States that you don't need prescriptions for in Turkey. A lot of those are sexual health related. I'll leave it to your imagination. But there are certain kinds of pills that a lot of times men of a certain age like to buy and they need a prescription for in America. In Turkey, you can buy those right over the counter. And they know that a lot of people come there for that reason. So people come and get hair transplants or nose jobs. People come and get their teeth fixed. And people also buy their nighttime pills. So you'll see it right when you go through the airport. You're also going to have a bunch of people yelling at you, yes, sir, do you want a taxi? Do you want a hotel? Do you want to? Don't even look at those people, bro. Don't even worry about them. Like, they're annoying. They're trying to get your attention. They're going to run your pockets. Do not look at those people. Even if you haven't booked your transportation yet, there's other options. Even if you haven't booked a place to stay yet, don't talk to those people, and you don't have to be polite to them. Just keep on walking. There's a couple options for getting from the airport to where you're staying. One of them is if you're staying at a hotel, you can hit them up and ask them if they have a shuttle and then find out where to meet that shuttle. You also can book an individual driver. I'm going to go ahead and recommend somebody, and I hope I don't regret this because maybe his business will become so busy that I won't be able to get a hold of him anymore. But Zia, if you're watching this, brother, I'm going to shout you out. There is a man named Zia who is a deeply spiritual, religious man. He speaks perfect English. He's incredible. He's an amazing, smooth driver. He will pick you up. He'll meet you at Burger King. You text him everything in advance. It's very reasonable prices. He has a big, nice van, and he also has an entire fleet of drivers that have these big, nice vans. They're air conditioned. It's a smooth ride. If you hit up Zia, you will not regret it. And please, if you're seeing this and you hit up Zia, let him know Brother Ali is the one that told us. I'm going to put his information on the screen. Zia, we love you, man. But you also can get a taxi or an Uber from the airport. Uber in Istanbul orders a taxi. It's just one of the ways to order a taxi. I would recommend getting your taxis that way. A lot of times it's easier to just hail a cab, but if you do that, it's very difficult to communicate. The rule of thumb is that Turks usually speak very, very little English, if any at all. And so when you're trying to negotiate prices, things like that, the Uber app will tell you how much it's supposed to cost. So I'm gonna tell you right now that it should cost around 1,000 lira to get from the airport to somewhere inside the city. 1,000 lira to 1,200 lira, which is around $30. It shouldn't really cost more than that. And the good thing about using the Uber app is that you can communicate with them. You can send them messages and the Uber app will translate on both ends for you. If you're using Google Translate, which you should have on your phone, or if you're using the app, speak in the most plain language. Don't use special little phrases. Don't be subtle. Be very, very direct. Can you take me? What is the price? Also, if you take a tunnel is going to cost a couple extra 100 lira. They enter the price when they get to your destination, but Uber will give you an estimate. So Uber will tell you it should cost about 300 lira. It should cost about 1,500 lira. That should be the price that you end up with. And sometimes you can tell them on the Uber app, I'm going to pay on the app. I'm going to pay, they call it system. I'm going to pay with the system. I will not pay cash. Tell them that. Sir, I'm not paying cash. Brother, they say, AB, ABI, AB. I'm not paying, I don't have cash. I'm going to pay on the system using the meter. Sometimes they'll try to tell you, oh, there's a lot of traffic, so it's going to cost 3,000 lira. No, that's 3 times the amount that you should be paying. Now, 3,000 lira is about $100 US. So if you want to go and pay it, it's your money. Go ahead. If it feels easier for you, then go ahead and do it. But your price, with the amount of taxis that you take, the cost of your trip is going to go up exponentially. You don't have to get ripped off. So if you're coming from the airport, I would say either holler at somebody like Zio or get an Uber. Also, if the person decides to try to run your pockets and they charge you for 3,000 lira, even though the price was only 1,500 lira, you can actually dispute that later. So let them go ahead and leave. You know what I'm saying? Wait until they're out of the area, and then you can dispute that price on Uber later. You can tell them, hey, you quoted me 1,500 lira. They tried to charge me 3,000. If they add a couple hundred lira, let it slide, because there is a price to go through the tunnels. What you're going to do to get a taxi, and for most people that you meet, is to leave out of door 13. If you leave out of door 13, you're going to see all sorts of signage and things like that on the exit. And also you'll go directly out and there'll be an elevator there. That elevator goes up to the second floor. Where arrivals are, that's the place where you historically will get an Uber. So the most common way is to go out through door 13, take the elevator upstairs, and then go to doors 6 and 7. When you select your Uber, when you order your Uber, they're going to ask you, are you at door 6 and 7? That's where you want to meet your driver. You look for the license plate of the driver and his name, and on the side of the cab, the license plate number is going to be painted in really big numbers, which is really good. So just look for the last 2 numbers. It'll be like G65453. So you tell everybody in your party, we're looking for 53, and you're going to see it both on the front where the license plate is, but also painted big on the side of the car. And it'll also tell you his name, Mustafa Ahmed with a T at the end. When you get in the car, you just add Bey to the end of that. Ahmed Bey. You know, if they say his name is Murad Bey. Lately, I've found that people are saying that Uber can't pick up in that area anymore. So they're going to lead you to another area. You're going to walk down a super long walkway, but when you get to the end of that place, there are people that will pick you up there. But whenever your Uber driver comes, make sure you jump in the car quickly, because the police do harass them sometimes. It's just a very unpredictable city. Get in the car quickly, make sure that they're going to the address, and then do your best. All right, let's talk about where to stay and where not to stay. First of all, it's important to know that these are places where there are people that are living very secular lives, and there are people that are living more conservative religious lives. And they share space very well. And part of the reason that that happens is because there are certain neighborhoods where those things are more prevalent. Some of the places that you do not want to stay. Do not stay in Kadikoy. There's Karakoy and Kadikoy. Koy means that something was a village that wasn't part of the original ancient city of Constantinople, but it was a village that was incorporated into the city. So you're going to see Ortakoy, Kadikoy, Karakoy. Kadikoy with a Kid, Koy. Don't stay there if you're trying to have a religious experience. And I actually would suggest visiting during the day, especially because there's a lot of dope record stores and coffee shops and antiques. There's all sorts of little cafes. There's really dope graffiti. You know what I'm saying? You can get health food over there. If you're vegetarian or vegan, that's one of the places you can go. But if you stay there, you're going to be around people who, especially at nighttime, they're there to go to nightclubs. They're there to drink in bars. You can even find restaurants there that serve pork. And you're probably going to have to really strain to hear the adhan. You do not want to stay in Taksim. You do not want to stay in Beşiktaş. Taksim has some cool places for shopping. They got dope places for breakfast. I'm not saying these places are like to be avoided, but there's a lot of hotels there, and that's why you got to say it. I've known people that are saying, I'm coming to Istanbul for the last 10 days of Ramadan. And I'm like, oh man, did you already get your hotel? Yeah, we're staying at the Doubletree in Kadakoy. And I'm like, okay, alhamdulillah. Now, Sultan Ahmed is the area where the Blue Mosque is. It's the area where the Hagia Sophia are. And that's okay, that's fine. But it's just important to know that's extremely touristy. So you're not going to get a very authentic experience there. It's going to be one of the few places where people are trying to scam you. You will be centrally located. You'll hear the adhan. You'll be in walking distance of the Blue Mosque and certain other places. You're centrally located. If you want to stay in religious areas, there's a mosque called Ismail Aga. That area is going to be, within the city of Istanbul, the most traditional, I would say, orthodox, conservative, religious place to stay. And that's definitely a place to visit as well. When you're in that area, most of the men are going to be wearing long robes and they're going to be wearing turbans. Most of the women are going to be wearing black clothes and maybe even face veils. You're going to find a lot of people there that speak Arabic. You're going to find, mosques all over the place, religious shops and tailors. And so I'll just go ahead and say it now. Ismail Aga is one of the places that you absolutely want to go. There's a place called Tarzi Ahmed, Ahmet, Tarzi Ahmed. That's one of the famous historical places to go for men if you want to go and have clothes tailored. It's not cheap. I mean, those are very, very beautiful, hilarious, warm, receptive, religious people. They speak a little English, they speak plenty of Arabic, and of course, they speak Turkish. They have a big book in there of all of these amazing religious scholars and speakers and people of knowledge from around the world that have come and got Turkish religious clothes made for them. So that's one of the places to go. If you want to shop off the rack, if you go around the corner from there, there's a place called Ahle Effendi. That's a place where you can shop off the rack for men. They sell the religious Turkish clothes there. So like the hammer pants, or what we call the Sufi pants, the shirts, the jubba. But for men and women, there's all kind of spots around there. And a place to eat there. See, I'm blowing up all my good places. Please go in there. If you're going to go to these places, watch the section on manners. Don't skip that. There's a place there called Mevlana Pide. Mevlana is how they pronounce Maulana, and so it's related to Jalaluddin Rumi, one of the spiritual giants of this part of the world. If you go to the place called Mevlana Pide, you'll get amazing lentil soup all over this country. That place in particular is special. If you're vegan or vegetarian, it's not going to work for you because it's made with bone broth and a lot of butter. But man, you can have lentil soup all over the world. I grew up in a community that was related to the Nation of Islam. They had bean soup. I'm sorry, everybody. It's very, very special. Just silky and buttery. And the main seating area is men only. If your group is women or mixed men and women, you go downstairs. There's a perfectly nice seating area down there too. Be respectful of the ways in the culture wherever you go. Okay, so Ismail Aga is a place where you could stay, and also the Fatih neighborhood on the European side is a place where a lot of Afghans stay. It's where a lot of Syrian people stay. It tends to be a little bit more religious in that area. And it's dope because if you're an Arabic speaker, you'll find people that speak Arabic. You can get some Arabic food. Fatih can be a little bit grimy. It can be a little bit what they call in the UK dodgy. And I find that to be the case anywhere in the world where you've got people from different cultures that are kind of thrown together for political and economic reasons. It's a lot of refugees there. So it's not because the Afghans are there and they're making it grimy. It's not because the Syrians are there or whoever. It's not any particular group. It's more so the circumstances. There's no place in Istanbul that's dangerous the way that America is dangerous. So if you're from Philly, if you're from Chicago, if you're from Detroit, if you're from North Minneapolis, you are not going to feel danger the way that you're used to feeling danger. Now, my favorite place to stay, and it's where my family lives, and I'm hesitant to say this, but Üsküdar. Üsküdar is on the Asian side. It's right when you get across the water from the European side. It's more quiet. It's less touristy. There's a lot of spiritual sites there. And the Westerners who came here to live with their families, who are spiritual, religious people, that's where most of us live. There's a couple of new hotels in that area. There's also a lot of Airbnbs. But I would say Üsküdar would probably be a really, really good place to stay if you're coming, especially with a family. It's centrally located, so there's the Marmaray train system is right there near the ferries, and there's all sorts of mosques and all sorts of good things to do. That's where I recommend staying. Again, if you're gonna come to where we live and make it hot and bring all that Western energy and everything, please watch the section on culture and manners, please. Let me tell you an experience, a person, an activity that I cannot recommend more highly. Get you a tour from the website called Istanbul Spiritual Tours, led by a very special, a very blessed, a very unique, a really funny and hilarious, if you get to know him in person, named Abu Ayyub. Our brother Abu Ayyub is a convert to Islam. He's of Colombian ethnicity, and if you know anything about Colombian people, they're very, very special people. He was raised in New York City, and he converted to Islam, and he's traveled all over the world studying the Islamic tradition. But this is a person who lives and breathes Islamic history, Ottoman history, and the history of the city of Istanbul and its people and its spiritual monuments and the amazing things that happened here. It's like when you're with him, it's like you are walking and living in the history of this blessed place with its blessed people. So whether this is your first trip here or you've been here 20 times, if you're a new Muslim, if you're not Muslim yet, if you've been Muslim all your life, if you think you got a little studying under your belt, I'm telling you, I cannot recommend more highly. Go to IstanbulSpiritualTours.com and see if you can book a tour with Abu Ayyub. It will be worth every penny. Let's talk about places to visit. Now, one of the main things about Istanbul is that there are 1,000 mosques that are operational in this city. And in every single one of those mosques, you'll find that they are alive. There's at least a small congregation of people praying all 5 of the daily prayers in the mosque. When you hear the call for prayer, it's not a recording. That's a human being standing in there giving an operatic level performance vocally. That alone is a reason to visit Istanbul. And for us, that alone was a reason to move to Istanbul. Just to hear the adhan. I mean, think about the fact that 1,000 human beings 5 times a day are getting on the speakers and delivering this undeniably beautiful. It's so beautiful that even the secular Turks do not really argue against the adhan, and they stretch the adhan out. You'll find that like in some places, the adhan, the call for prayer will be like a minute. Here, the adhan could easily take 10 minutes. If there's 2 big mosques right across the street from each other, like there is in Üsküdar, the Mihrama Jami and the Yeni Valide Jami, both built by women. In all the prayers, except for the evening prayer for Maghrib, they go back and forth. It's like a cipher. So on one side of the street, the imam will say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And then he'll pause, and the imam on the other side of the street on his loudspeaker says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It's a big production. In Saudi Arabia, it's very muted. It's very subdued. Allahu Akbar, Allah. In Istanbul, it's like a whole thing. And the more you can learn about the tradition of Sayyidina Bilal, who was the first person to call the adhan, the more it's going to mean to you. It's a really incredible, beautiful thing. But know that if you're coming to Istanbul, you're going to hear that call for prayer 5 times a day. The first one is going to be before the sun rises. The last one is going to be when the sky is completely dark. It's going to be a big part of your day. And you'll notice that even in places that aren't religious, if they're playing music and you hear the adhan, they'll mute the music during the adhan, just to be respectful. These are very, very special people that even though they disagree very deeply about their worldview and the way the society is set up, they've learned how to share space in really beautiful ways. So respect that. The Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, Sultan Ahmed, are directly across the street from each other. That is the most touristy place in Istanbul that you're going to go to. And I'm just going to keep it all the way funky. They're not my favorite. And that's no disrespect to the people that built them and maintain them and for all the incredible things that happened there. The Blue Mosque in particular is extremely beautiful, but it is really, really touristy. If you're Muslim, they will let you in right at the prayer times. So don't expect to be able to just go all the time and get in easily and pray whenever you want, even though both the Hagia Sophia and Sultan Ahmed are operational mosques. You're going to want to time it so that you're going just right before the prayer time, and then you go in and pray. And if you're not Muslim, they just have instituted something where they're treating them like museum type of sites. And so they will probably charge you to get in. There's probably going to be a certain entrance for you to enter. Hagia Sophia is undoubtedly a religious and spiritual and historical site that has tremendous gravity and weight, and it is actually a spiritual place to visit. So I would recommend that one. I'm not hating on the Blue Mosque, but I'm saying if you don't go to the Blue Mosque, it's okay. I'm actually going to tell you a mosque that I prefer leaps and bounds over the experience of visiting Sultan Ahmed. But the Hagia Sophia is something to see. Remember that you're going to want to be fully dressed. They will let men in there with short sleeves, but man, just get you a linen shirt with long sleeves. It's more appropriate for visiting a mosque. It's better for Muslim men to wear a cap, to wear something on our heads. I mean, think about the fact that our wives are kind of out there on the front line, our sisters, and they're wearing hijab all the time. I mean, religiously, you don't have to wear a hat as a Muslim man. You don't have to. But I think it's better, especially if we're out amongst our sisters and amongst our wives. And also, it's objectively, religiously better to be covered more. So get you a linen shirt that has long sleeves. It'll breathe. You will live. It'll be fine. Again, when you go into the mosques and the resting places and homes, it's okay. It's totally fine to wear your Birkenstocks or your Crocs or whatever, if that's how you choose to live your life. You can wear those without socks, it's fine. But when you go into a mosque or a resting place or a home, have a pair of socks in your bag that you can slide on. And for ladies, when you go into those places, you're going to want to have a scarf or a hijab that covers your hair. So the Hagia Sophia is a historically and spiritually important place to go visit. But there are a lot of other big, beautiful mosques that you could visit. A lot of these bigger mosques in Turkish are going to be called jami. The C, which makes a J sound in the Turkish language, and then the I with the dot at the end, which says E. So jami. It's not kami, it's jami. And also, it's not Arabic. A lot of these words are derived from Arabic words, but we're not just saying the Arabic word. We're not saying jami, we're saying jami, jami, because that's how they say it in Turkish, and this is their country. You can go to the Beyazid Jami. You can go to the Fatih Jami. My favorite one in this entire country is the Suleymaniye. This place was built by Kanuni Sultan Suleiman Khan. It is an incredible place that was built by Mimar Sinan, the great architect. He was a convert from Christianity to Islam. This man was an artistic genius, an engineering genius, a spiritual master, a master of the way that light is used, the way that air flows. I mean, every single detail of the places that he built, especially the Suleymaniye. When it was fully operational, it was a mosque, it was a public bathhouse, it was a hospital, it was a meeting place. It was a university. Dignitaries could come and stay. There was a special quarters for the Jewish advisor. There was a special quarters on site for the Sultan's wife. To me, the Suleymaniye, just the orangeness of it and how perfectly set up it is. There's something so amazingly soulful about it. The first time I walked in there, I said, it looks like Curtis Mayfield should be calling the adhan in this place. I can't explain it, but it's not touristy. When you go there, it's as big, if not bigger. It's as beautiful, if not more beautiful than Sultan Ahmed and some of the other touristy places, but it's not touristy. There's an amazing place where you can look out and see the entire city. The views are incredible, but you're going to see families out there with kids riding skateboards and chasing each other around and shooting water guns at each other. Children are welcome to run around and be themselves and expressing themselves fully in mosques in Istanbul. So if you see kids running around and jumping in and out of the wooden windowsills and things like that, they are allowed to do that. Don't stop them. That's welcome. You're going to see adults that are like the caretakers of the mosque getting up when they see kids. It's not to shush them, it's to go get them candy, or it's to give them ice cream, or it's to give them money. You leave kids alone when you're at the mosque in Turkey. It's not like other places. But you can go into the Suleymaniye even if you're not Muslim, and you'll see people will go in there and just spend a day just being by themselves, reading the Quran, thinking, contemplating. I've gone in the Suleymaniye and just taken a nap. Like there's days where I'll go in there and just spend the entire day. I'll just pray all 5 prayers there. There's restaurants directly across the street. Take my advice and go to the Suleymaniye. Do not miss it. One of the most important things to do when you're in Istanbul is you're going to see there's a lot of graves, or what we call them maqams, which means the resting places of these amazing saintly figures. A lot of them are sultans, a lot of them are sheikhs. In the case of Ayyub Sultan, or Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he was, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, the caretaker, the host of the Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him. And he's the person who, after hearing the Prophet Muhammad give the prophetic statement that this place would be a land of Islam, he actually came here and died here. And his resting place and his mosque is the most spiritual place in the city of Istanbul. It's called Ayyub Sultan. Everybody knows it. A lot of people say that it's best manners to come directly from the airport and to go to Ayyub Sultan. You'll notice also inside the resting place that there are relics of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and there also are relics at the Topkapi Palace, and they're spread throughout the city of Istanbul. These are really important, what they call athirat, from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They're things that he owned. It's not part of the Islamic creed that you have to believe that these things are authentic, and there certainly are people who have their doubts. As modern people, we don't have a history of holding on to relics like this. Two things that I would say are important to know. One, the relics of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, such as the cloak, the burda, that's held in Istanbul, and they only bring it out during Ramadan. This burda, this cloak, this hulla, it was a gift from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to Uwais. Uwais was a person who the Prophet, peace be upon him, knew about, and he knew about the Prophet, but they never met in this life. He said that he wanted to go and visit. He wanted to go and be with the Prophet, peace be upon him, to live with him and pray with him and live life with him. But he stayed behind. Every time he wanted to go, he stayed to take care of his mother. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was aware of this man, and he honored the fact that he stayed to take care of his mother. And so he told his closest companions, if you travel in that direction, look for a man named Uwais and ask him to pray for you. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, when you see him, give him this cloak of mine, this hulla, this burda. Give him this as a gift from me. That cloak was given to this man Uwais, and then he left it as an inheritance to his children. And it's still in the family of Uwais, and their family still are the custodians of it to this day. All of these relics of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his beard hairs, the blade from his sword, a sandal, all of these things that belong to him, they are still in possession of the Muslims, and they were under the care of the Ottoman Caliphate. So when you go to Ayyub Sultan, to his resting place, you'll see it there. Have good manners with those things. Don't be disrespectful. The same way that there are certain sayings in the hadith that are considered sahih. There's no possible way that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't say this thing. There's what they call diffused congruence. There's so many different narratives of accounts that people never met each other that have the exact same story. The chain of transmission of all of those is rock solid. A sahih hadith is something that in our theology we have to affirm. But there are other hadith that aren't quite at that level, but we're not rude with those hadith. We still have good manners because the likelihood that those words were uttered by the messenger of God, peace be upon him, is still really high. So we don't want to be disrespectful with that stuff. So even if you personally, I do believe that the relics of the Prophet Muhammad are authentic. I do believe that. You don't have to believe it as a matter of aqidah. But even if you don't have good manners, don't be disrespectful with those things. You can visit those things with the idea that somebody thought these may have been possessions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, so I'm going to respect that that was their intention. Visiting the mosque and the resting place of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari is something that's good to do. The Prophet Muhammad, at the beginning of his time as a prophet, peace be upon him, told the Meccan people, don't go and visit the graves, because they had certain things that a lot of our cultures have, where they made a big show out of mourning at the grave. I'm mourning harder than everybody. Some of us have that in their culture, where grandma might jump inside the coffin or something like that. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, this is ignorant behavior that a lot of us have in our culture. We're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to make a big show out of mourning our dead. So in the beginning of his prophecy, peace be upon him, he told his companions, don't go visit the graves. Later on, though, Once they had time to build a relationship with the theology of Islam and with the way of Islam, he actually did encourage them. He said, give salam to the people in the graves. It's good to go and visit them. It's good to go and remember our own death. There were scholars that differed about whether or not a person should make a dua to Allah, asking you by virtue of this beautiful person that I'm visiting, because I believe that this person has some spiritual gravity to them. And the soul is connected in some kind of way to the resting place. The Prophet Muhammad encouraged people in one narration, peace be upon him, to take green things and put them on the gravesite, because while that thing is green, it's glorifying Allah, and it will be a pleasure to the person who's in that grave. When we bring people to Turkey, when people come and visit Turkey, and when we go and visit these places, we do visit the graves of the great people. And so it's completely your choice. But what's considered the best adab, the best manners with the people who lived and fought along with the Prophet Muhammad, who hosted him and who ultimately died trying to make good on his prophecies, that it's good to go visit those people. So a lot of times you'll find people coming straight from the airport, and that they'll also go to visit Abu Ayyub al-Ansari right before they leave. There are other really important resting places of great people to visit. One of them is the grave of Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih. This is a person who the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, praised several hundred years before the prophecy was actually fulfilled. He said, Constantinople will be a land of Islam. How blessed will be the people that go and make that a reality, and how blessed will be their leader. And their leader was Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih. And so that's a good one to go and visit. It's good to go visit Bayazid. It's good to go visit Abdul Hamid. Another one of the ones that people like to visit on the Asian side is the resting place of Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi. Allah have mercy on him. This was a great scholar. Their particular spiritual practice, along with praying 5 times a day and fasting and memorizing and studying and reciting the Quran and giving charity and all the stuff that we have in the 5 pillars, they also spent a lot of time in solitude, being alone and becoming more sincere and getting closer to Allah. And he was a person that had tremendous openings and insights, and he was the sultan of several of the early sultans. So what's dope is that we have this idea that, somebody that came and visited Istanbul said all the religions are good, but when men get involved and people get involved and the power gets involved, they always get corrupt and they always ruin it. I will agree that that is usually the case. But part of the reason that we love this tradition so much and we love to be in this city is that there are examples of people who were powerful, whether they were the actual sultan or the sheikh of the sultan. The early sultans especially had religious advisors that they asked their permission and their advice, and they listened to them. And we love those people because they kept the sultan in line. The story goes that when Sultan Ahmed was building the Blue Mosque, he's building it directly across the street from Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia was the greatest church in Christendom, and it became one of the greatest mosques in Islam. It unsettled his spirit that one of the greatest mosques in Islam was built by Christians as a church, and he wanted to build something that was as big and as bad and as dope as that. So he set out to build Sultan Ahmed, the Blue Mosque. During this process, he had a dream that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to him and was upset with him. This is the story that's reached us. Sultan Ahmed goes to his sheikh, Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi, and he said, you got to help me. I had this bad dream that the Prophet Muhammad was mad at me, peace be upon him. The sheikh doesn't say, don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry. Just keep giving me money and I'll keep sanctifying what you're doing. He said, well, what did you do? Like, what have you done? How are you using your power? So he described all this stuff that he's doing, and he's describing his mosque he's building. And he says, I ordered that relics from different parts of the caliphate be brought here. These things that belong to the Prophet Muhammad, I ordered that they be taken away from the people that were their caretakers and brought here so I could put them in my mosque. And Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi says, you can't do that. And there's all this scandal, rightfully so, I think, about the British Museum, for example, and all the stuff that they stole from different parts of their empire. The sheikh, the scholar, Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi, the religious authority, says to the leader, you have to give those back. And Sultan Ahmed says, but I want this mosque of mine to be visited. I want it to be known. I'm trying to do this to bolster the spirit of Islam. I'm trying to show people how incredible this tradition is. And Aziz Mahmoud says, that's fine. But he says, but we're not going to do it. You have to return those things. I'm going to go and give the first Jummah khutbah, the first inaugural sermon at your mosque. And I'm going to pray for it, and people are going to visit it. Don't worry. So on the day of the inaugural Jummah, the first service and the first service, Aziz Mahmoud goes to the Bosphorus, this strait of water between the European side and the Asian side where he lives, and the Bosphorus is really choppy. It's really rough water. And all of the people that operate their boats, these professional boat people, have all taken their ships off the water because they're like, no, the water's too crazy. We're not doing it. It's a day off, snow day. Don't worry about it. It's rained out. We're not doing it. Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi says, I gave my word. I have to keep my word. They secured their own boat. And they said, all right, we're not master rowers, but we're about to row our boat across this Bosphorus to keep our word. So they got in the boat and they did their recitations and they remembered Allah. They did their dhikr and they recited the Quran. And they took a particular route to get from the Asian side to the European side. Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi delivered the sermon and he prayed for the mosque. And to this day, it is the fourth most highly visited mosque in the world. And for non-Muslims, because non-Muslims can visit it, it's the number one sought out, most visited mosque in the world. So the prayers of Aziz Mahmoud, the Sheikh, after insisting that the Sultan does the right thing, even though he has the power to do something different, it resonated and it came true. So it's cool to visit Sultan Ahmed. It's cool to visit the Blue Mosque. It's beautiful. One of my dear friends just got married there recently and it was like, yo, you got married at the Blue Mosque? Crazy. It's a beautiful place to go and visit, but with all of the tourists and all the stuff, there's something about it that just doesn't have that same vibe. So I say go to the Suleymaniya and go visit Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi, his resting place. When you go there, it's an active mosque, it's an active school. Every day the people in the neighborhood, if they make a big mistake, if they do a sin or do something they're not supposed to do, as is the case, sometimes you do something you're not supposed to do. And one of the things you can do is sacrifice an animal and give the meat to the poor. So there's a slaughterhouse there where they humanely slaughter animals, sacrifice animals every day. And you'll see once a day, the people in the neighborhood line up. That's the neighborhood I live in Uskudar, and I mean they're just giving away lentils, rice, they're giving away soup, and they're giving away fresh, slaughtered, locally sourced, hand slaughtered, humanely treated and slaughtered, I mean beef, lamb, goat, sheep, every single day. It's incredible. It's a really incredible thing to see. And I've lived in this neighborhood for 4 years. I've never seen a homeless person. I've seen people sleeping on benches, and I might see them one night because I walk around late sometimes. I never see the same person twice. It's like, oh, something happened. You might see every month, you might see a person sleeping on a bench. But people here are not starving. They're not going hungry. So I would say visit these places. Visit Abu Ayyub al-Ansari or Ayyub Sultan. Allah be well pleased with him. Visit Aziz Mahmoud Hudayi. One of the things they say is because of his relationship with the Bosphorus, the people who visit him will never die by drowning. But it's a beautiful place to visit. And you'll see that it's the reason that this neighborhood of Uskudar is what it is.